Hello again. Welcome to Kano Iwanyayi broadcast with Sangwazi Spiwe Kachiza Mapfumo. We have another exciting segment today where I bring to you another ordinary person doing extraordinary work. Today's guest is Chido Muntyati. I tried to bring him earlier on our live program couple of months ago, but we had problem and he's a very busy man. But today I managed to get Chido to talk to us. And so, Chido, welcome to the program. And I'm looking forward to talking to you and hearing what amazing stuff that you've been doing that you'll share with everybody else. I'd like you to say hello to everybody today.
Good afternoon, everyone, from Geneva, Switzerland. Very much happy to be here with Auntie Spiwe and with everyone else who's tuned in, and then looking forward to the conversation.
Good, thank you. Now, as I said earlier on, I'm bringing an ordinary person who is doing extraordinary work. Now, this young man is absolutely incredible. I have to give you his profile, his full profile, so you can understand where we're coming from before we get into it. Chido, as you can see at the bottom there, is the head of Africa at World Economic Forum in Geneva. And the World Economic Forum is the international organization committee improving the state of the world by leveraging its trusted status to global platform for shaping the future of economies and social and industrial systems. It sounds like a mouthful, but Chido will break it down for us later, right? And let me go further. Prior to his role, Chido was a global leadership fellow at the World Economic Forum. I will go on again and give you more of because his profile is just incredible for a young man like him, right? Before that, he worked at a law firm, at a leading Swiss law firm called Floriep. Is that correct? Did I say it right? Floriep and the United Nations International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda. He earned his Juris Doctor at Hofstra University School of Law in the United States, and he was awarded an an academic scholarship, which was worth about $150,000. That again, on its own, it's a lot. His work has been published in Brookings Institution, CBNC, and Africa Business, among other leading institutions. He has rubbed shoulders with big people and great international leaders. And for a young man, that's a whole lot to take that in one sitting, to tell you the truth. When I was reading his profile, I just could not believe it. I mean, because Chido is a very young man. Not only that, we'll talk again in our conversation. I want him to talk about this recent recognition where he was recognized as one of the 100 under 40. Yeah? Is it called MIPAD? Okay. This is most influential people of African descent. And he was recognized and nominated. He was one of those 100 people. And that's huge. That's huge. Anyway, let me not say everything for you. I want you to be able to talk to us about what you do at the World Economic Forum. That's a huge position. You'd expect somebody in their 60s and just about to retire to hold a position like that. But Chido, you're only 38. That's huge. Tell us about your job at the as the head of Africa, of the whole of Africa at World Economic Forum. What do you do there?
No, thank you, Auntie Spiwe. So I do a multitude of things as a head of the regional agenda for Africa at the World Economic Forum. So I guess at a top level, my job is to coordinate and shape the Africa agenda at the World Economic Forum for the work that we do. for the systems leadership that we aim to advance. And so specifically, what this means is that on one end, I manage relationships with African heads of states, with ministers, understanding what their policy priorities are, and then integrating them into the different centers that we have at the World Economic Forum that are geared towards driving systemic change. So an example of a system is the system of nature and climate. You can't address a global issue like that without having all the multiple stakeholders at the table. And at the World Economic Forum, what we have is sort of this credibility with global business. So up to 1,000 of the world's largest companies are our partners. So we bring business to the table, we bring governments, civil society, academia, youth communities. And so my core responsibility is helping coordinate the collaboration with African heads of states and ministers. So I really have to understand at a deep level what their challenges and policy prescriptions are, and then taking those ideas and helping them then scale or accelerate that policy delivery through our different platforms. And so as I mentioned, we have these 10 different centers. They almost act as, I guess you could think of them as like policy delivery units. So I'll go to a certain government, have a conversation with them. They'll say, okay, we really want to advance this agenda of eliminating plastic waste in our country. Pollution is a big issue. I will then connect them with our nature and climate team. And we have an initiative that's called the Global Alliance for Plastic Solutions, where we work with the World Bank and different other partners to then help that government deliver this policy agenda to eliminate plastic waste. That's just one small example, but there are many different things that we do across all these multitude of issues.
That, as you said, really, that's huge. That's a lot of stuff you've said in like 2 minutes, right? Because when you talk about a country's agenda or any government's agenda, it's a lot that is packed in there, and their needs obviously are different. As you give an example of like plastic waste, if they want to to tackle that, then you go in there and you connect them with them. I'm trying to break it down in understandable language, not to connect them with the right international organizations that could assist them in that manner. Is that correct?
No. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can now. Go ahead.
Apologies, I was getting a call. So we actually run our own initiatives and projects related to these global systemic issues. And so what we do is we will incorporate a country or a minister into one of our communities that's working on this issue. So the advantage of the World Economic Forum is that because it's global and multi-stakeholder, it provides a unique opportunity to learn best practices. So for example, if you had the Minister of Environment from Malawi in this community, he's learning from what the Minister of Environment from Singapore is doing. He's learning from what different businesses are doing and advancing as best practices, as well as understanding from civil society, from youth, from academia, how best to shape these policies, and then hopefully take away sort of this learning, this understanding, to then advance what they're doing at a local level. So these projects are at different levels. Some of them, are, what we would call, these type 1 projects, which are larger, bigger projects that we drive ourselves. But most of the work we do is in collaboration. So we think of ourselves as a platform where we then have different other organizations working in concert to advance a common agenda.
Does that involve any financial assistance to these countries? Because I'm assuming for instance, some of the African countries, they really have been struggling financially and they cannot afford to embark on huge programs like that with yourselves. How does that work in terms of countries which are less capable of doing that financially?
So we don't provide financial assistance, but what a country can benefit from is if they're shaping their policies in a way that can then attract financial support, whether it's from multilateral banks or from the private sector. If they understand how to best structure their policies to attract that money, they can then get money. So we wouldn't in any capacity directly give money to these organizations, to these countries, excuse me, but we will help them understand how best to frame their challenges to then hopefully attract the money that they need to address their local issues.
How many of African countries are fully participating in these opportunities that are available? Because I know that this could be something that is there, but some of the countries not being, or some of the governments not aware that they could benefit with such linkages and or such cooperation with with yourselves.
So I think fortunately, because the World Economic Forum is now globally known as the platform for public-private partnerships, most countries do know of us and are aware of us, but we do make an effort to reach out to countries to help them understand how we can support what they're doing through our platform work. So part of that involves myself traveling to countries, meeting with governments, understanding what their challenges are. And a lot of it, in fact, is just governments coming to us. I would say the vast majority of our collaborations are governments expressing interest in working with the World Economic Forum, because what they value from us, which is quite unique, is this collaboration with the private sector. The private sector brings a different perspective. It's usually, in the frame from a commercial perspective. They usually think of doing things, I guess, in ways that are different from how other, sectors would think about problems. And they tend to be a bit more practical, a little bit more, I don't know, they tend to be a little less sentimental about how to address some of these issues. And so that's tends to be, the unique perspective that we have.
I do remember that when Zimbabwe's president came into the office, he was invited to Davos. I think it was because of your introduction to that, which I thought was really amazing, to bring him really to the international stage, so to meet other leaders. That was really great, and I also remember seeing a picture of you with President Kagame. And I think we were on one of your trips to Rwanda, and I do see that earlier on you did work with Rwanda quite closely. Can you tell me about that?
So Rwanda is really a dynamic and impressive country. They have very strong leadership. They're very innovative, and I think most importantly, they have a great delivery structure. They're very good at implementing and driving projects, which is why the private sector is always very interested in working with them. They have, very young, dynamic ministers who understand these broader systemic challenges and understand how to best frame their challenges and problems in a way that will attract support from the private sector. And so Rwanda has always been a natural collaborator with the World Economic Forum because of this. Rwanda, for example, we have a collaboration with them, an affiliate center for the fourth industrial revolution. So the center, the purpose of it is really to think through governance challenges related to all of these emerging technologies, to help with technology adoption, technology governance and policy. And some of the projects that have come out of this is governance related to drones. So Rwanda was at the forefront of shaping policies related to how countries will operate commercial drones. And this started in Rwanda in a collaboration with us. Another collaboration that we've done with them, as I mentioned, is a Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution that's in Rwanda. They've developed a technology that uses artificial intelligence to deliver health services. And so there are many different things that we've done with Rwanda, I think, over the last 2 decades that are quite remarkable and interesting. And so Rwanda is, I guess, one of those, test cases, those success stories of how to leverage a public-private partnership. We've also, as you mentioned, the president of Zimbabwe came to Davos. He's come actually several times. And I think they are looking to see how they can better engage with the international community. As everyone is well aware, Zimbabwe didn't have sort of this access to the global community for a very long time because of the results of the land reform program, and so being able to platform Zimbabwe and have them engage with the international community, with global business, could go a long way to addressing some of the local challenges that you see in Zimbabwe.
That's fantastic. And I do know that there's some smaller countries in Africa, it's part of Africa, who probably are struggling with that. And I don't know how you can get them to speed when you look at them and maybe talk to them and see that their problems are used in they're small, they're very small countries. How then do you decide where they need help? Or are they the ones who share with you and say we're struggling with this, or we could use your help in such areas?
Yeah, so we don't actually necessarily approach countries like a consultant would and say, these are some of the challenges that we see in your country, and these are some of the solutions that we can bring to help you address them. What we are is sort of this platform for public-private cooperation, and countries can approach us if they have specific issues and challenges that they're trying to address across various sectors, and based on the need, if there's a match with the World Economic Forum, if we're working on that particular issue, we can then integrate them into our center's work, where they can either benefit from some of the insights that we're generating, or they can benefit from being part of a community that's working and addressing on these issues at a global level, or they could potentially be the recipient, or they could potentially drive a project or initiative with the support of the World Economic Forum and our various partners. So it's less about us approaching people and more about people coming to us to collaborate on different things that might potentially help them advance some of their policies and challenges.
Gotcha. Now, Chido, tell me, you went to school, you are a lawyer, right? And how did this whole thing evolve? Because I'm in a very difficult position because I've known you since you were a child, right? So you go to school and all that stuff. But when you went to the United States and then you went to law school, how did that evolve to having you now in a position that you have right now? Maybe you could put a linkage to that. What you being a lawyer and then you went to Geneva, not directly to the World Economic Forum. You went there to work as for a law firm, right?
Yeah. So how it worked. So you again. I partly grew up in your home, so me as this person who was aspiring to become a professional tennis player.
Of course.
All I cared about was sports, and I was super passionate about that. When I wasn't able to, achieve that outcome, I think somewhat towards the end of my undergraduate college studies, I sort of had this sort of intellectual awakening, as it were, and I, started reading a lot of interesting biographies, books, fiction, that then helped me start to reframe, or I guess you could say reinvent myself in terms of what I wanted to do going forward. And I was particularly inspired by this framework that Obama articulated about how he was able to reinvent himself. And it's a theme sort of throughout my life, and I think other young people can benefit from, in terms of, your life isn't necessarily set in stone. If you're passionate and you have sort of direction in terms of what you want to do and you're disciplined enough, you can, sort of shift sort of your identity and your ambitions. And so I made that shift. I realized very early on through a lot of the reading that I wanted to do, that I wanted to go into politics. Specifically, I became quite passionate about policy. And so I realized that a lot of the people who are in politics or in policy went to law school, largely because you develop very strong analytical skills as a lawyer. And so, as you mentioned earlier, I did pretty well on my LSATs, which are the exams for admission into university in the United States. And because of the strong score that I attained, I was able to get a full scholarship to attend Hofstra Law School. And it was through that that I then started again exploring different opportunities in the policy space. And so the first opportunity was I actually, and this is an interesting anecdote that I'm sure your listeners will enjoy. So I applied to join for an internship at the International Tribunal for Rwanda because I read this book by a general called Dallaire who happened to be in Rwanda at the time and sort of just articulated how the whole UN system had perhaps failed Rwanda. And I was quite passionate about the Rwanda story. And so I went to go work for the prosecutions. And in my so I applied and I got in quite quickly. And I thought it was because I was so brilliant. And I arrived there, and the woman in the HR department is a Zimbabwean woman, and she's like, Chido, she thought I was a woman because she wanted to bring more women because I guess they had a low proportion of female interns, and so the one benefit from my parents naming me Chido finally started to pay off, and then it was this experience working at the Rwanda Tribunal over a 2-year period. After that, I then moved home to Zimbabwe because I felt a bit disconnected. A lot of people on this call probably relate to this, spending and living their lives between Zimbabwe and a second country. And at that point, I probably spent about 13 years in the US and 13 years in Zimbabwe. And I started to feel a bit of that disconnection. And I always knew that my passion and goals long term were doing some sort of policy work in Zimbabwe. So I went home and I spent about 3 years in Zim, which weren't easy, to be honest. And at some point, I realized that perhaps I needed to further my education and develop more personal leadership skills. And I came across this opportunity at the World Economic Forum, the Global Leadership Fellowship Program, which was a perfect intersection for me between the private sector and the public sector policy space. And I applied from Zimbabwe, and fortunately, because of technology, I was able to do the Zoom interview. They then flew me down to Geneva for the in-person interview. It was a really long and extensive process over 6 months. And fortunately, I was able to then get into the World Economic Forum's Global Leadership Fellowship Program. And what this program is effectively is an internal accelerator. So the idea is that, people from this program, they only take 22 people every year. The idea is that these people should be the agents of change in the organization and should aspire for leadership positions within the organization. And fortunately enough, after about 4 years, the program is 3 years. So what you do is you take all of these experiential leadership courses. You go to CEIBS in China, you go to INSEAD in Paris, in France. You go to Oxford, London School of LBS, Oxford modules. It was really just incredible that I got it. It was a full-time job. I got a full-time salary, and I was still getting this gift to develop my personal leadership skills.
How old were you then, or that time?
At that time, I would have been, I think I was 32 when I started the program, or 31. I was 31 when I started the program. And then, 4 years later, I was fortunate enough to then get this opportunity to head the Africa department to the World Economic Forum. And now I find myself in, these incredible situations, as you mentioned earlier, traveling to Ghana, and meeting, with the head of states, meeting with various ministers, getting to work with governments to understand their policy challenges. And as someone who's passionate about Africa and passionate about policy, it really is a dream job. The idea that I get to think, systemically about how to address some of Africa's problems on a day-to-day basis is quite a unique opportunity.
The gift of this thing is because you're so young. You don't realize it. Yeah, you don't realize it because today I had to get up early. This is very early to do this recording because you said, and if I don't do it that early, I'm on my way to Nigeria. And you're all over the place and meet, not only just going to those places, but meeting very influential people, and at such an age. That is really incredible. That's incredible. I want you to talk to me about that that recognition by MIPAD. what does that entail? What is it? And because when I saw it, and I saw someone else like 100 people of other forces around the world. I mean, people of African descent. And Chido, our Chido is there. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I can share too much about it because I don't know a whole lot about it. I do know that it's a pretty prestigious award. Every year they identify, 100 under 40 people who they think are the most influential, however they define influential. And I think my recognition came from the fact that I have a unique position at the World Economic Forum where I'm able to work with governments and companies, civil society and academia to help shape agendas for a positive outcome. So I think the recognition is also largely to do with the fact that the World Economic Forum platform gives me this global visibility. So it was a great recognition. But I don't let it get to me too much.
You don't want it to get to you. Well, it did get a lot to me because I was telling everybody, and they said, "Oh, what do you mean you know him?" I said, "You know what? I don't even know how to explain it to you about this guy, this young man that, like you said, I mean, you grew up in my house with my son, and here you are. That's really incredible. That's very impressive, and we appreciate the work that you are doing." I don't know what you tell other younger people, people your age group who have finished high school or who just started their careers. What word do you have to say to them?
I think the most important thing is for us to be very curious, always seek to learn new things, particularly in the world that we live in now. The changes and the shifts, both socially and economically, happen so dramatically and so quickly now. Because of these advances in emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence, which is now sort of the big global tectonic shift that we see now. But outside of that, I think if you're passionate about something, I think being dedicated and working hard towards that, not being afraid to reinvent yourself towards something else that you might be more passionate about. That's something that I did in my career. You have time to do it. If you're disciplined enough and you're truly passionate about a certain subject or a vocation, don't hesitate to go for it. And then also just networking. I get lots of messages throughout the week from young Zimbabweans on a regular basis. And if it comes from a young Zimbabwean, I always respond because, there were people, from my career who helped me, not necessarily, getting a job, but providing inspiration or guidance and helping me, understand how I could potentially get to, achieving things that I didn't quite understand at that time. And then also, I think the final one is just also networking laterally. So across, we always tend to, want to speak to the CEO or the minister or the most powerful, influential people. But the reality is that they can only tell you how they got to where they were using an old framework and model that's no longer relevant in the world that we're in today. So network with your peers who are, in different industries, in different countries, who can also give you some very valuable insights and perspectives.
I think that's key to younger people now when their upward mobility is based on networking, because largely networking, because on your own, you only know so much and you really don't know some of those little, that can help you put your best foot forward. And unless you share with other people who have gone through it, like yourself, it goes a long way. Thank you so much. I know for me, it's so early in the morning, and I know you're in a hurry to get yourself packed and dash off to Africa. And congratulations on all these successes that you've been telling us about, and how you're putting our name on the map. That is fantastic. And for a 38-year-old young man, that should be applauded, and we appreciate so much what you're doing. And again, good luck with your career, and we hope to see you again. We'll bring you here again to talk to us more about what you're doing in Geneva and in general. Another ordinary person doing extraordinary work. Thank you, Chido, and have a great day.
No, thank you so much, Shatu.
Yes, and I'll see you again, people, next time when I bring another person to you on Kano Iwanyayi broadcast. This is Sangwa Spirit.